Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Bloodclot Souls out December 16th on Upstate Records. This album has 7 tracks, 21 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an American hardcore punk band. As far as the design goes, the album is very dynamic, the album is very fluid, very engaging, but I wasn't expecting anything less from a record that has 7 tracks in 21 minutes. There's not a lot of room to wiggle. You have to get these songs moving and you have to get the listener interested in it because the experience feels very short, more like an EP than a full-length record. Having said all of that, they still found a way of creating 2 different momentums within this album. The first half of the album feels a lot heavier. The second half of the album feels a lot more direct. The record finishes off with the Bad Brains cover, How Low Can a Punk Get? That's an interesting element because it adds to the musicality that the album finishes with, a song that fits in and it fits perfectly in the overall narrative of the album, and it's an interesting way of paying homage to a band that they looked up to, a band that definitely influenced Bloodclot. Now these 2 momentums of the album are better represented in the soundscape of the record than in the actual design of the songs. The first half is definitely more hardcore, punchier, a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, a little bit groovier. It has that side of the band better represented across the first 3 to 4 songs. After that, the album becomes more punk rock. Definitely the punk influences come forward. The album becomes a lot more fluid. It becomes more direct. The sound cuts through a little bit more and you're able to see the other side of the band. And then that cover obviously is the icing on the cake that defines that last moment, that defines that ending momentum that the record offers. When you look at these 2 different sides, while different, obviously there's similarities between them, and those similarities allow the overall album sound-wise to assimilate with one another and give this record some sense of consistency and some sense of cohesiveness. But you still see the differences and you're still gonna feel them because what separates them really comes into the forefront a lot more than what unites it. I enjoyed both sides because at the end of the day, it's all Bloodclot. That heavier sound, that groovier sound, that New York style hardcore that the album opens up with allows you to feel an immediate impact into your listening experience. The guitars are thicker, the guitars are heavier, the drums pack the sound extremely well, giving a lot of power to that heaviness. And then in that second side, the driven sound, the guitar is becoming a lot more penetrating. The album becomes more intense. The aggression is there on both, but it becomes definitely more intense, and you feel that intensity song in and song out. There's perhaps a track that breaks the mold of both sides, and I'll talk more about that when I speak about my favorite songs on this record. But when you look at the drum sound and when you look at the guitars, the difference between the beginning of the album and the end of the album really emphasizes the quality that both elements bring to the table. The drums on this record definitely ground the album, definitely give the album a sense of substance and also a sense of depth. This is never a record that sounds very thin. It always feels a little bit more robust, not necessarily heavy, but robust in how it comes across on both ends of the spectrum. The same thing could be said for the guitars, that thickness at the beginning with a more penetrating guitar sound, the more pure rock and roll guitar sound towards the end. It's just one becoming the extension of the other. They work really well. You're still going to see some elements cross-pollinating from track to track, but it's an album that guitar-wise really offers a lot. It's a very guitar-driven, it's a very guitar-centric record, as you would expect from a punk album, as you would expect from a hardcore album, and this album brings those 2 worlds together perfectly. Now, as far as the vocals are concerned, John Joseph kills it on the vocals. He is able to emphasize all the aggression that the sound has. He's able to emphasize all the intensity that the sound has. And he's able to emphasize the message of the lyrics on every single song that this album offers. It's a very dynamic performance, it's a very engaging performance, and outside of one single track, he stays in the pocket and stays very consistent from start to finish. And while this is a shorter record than the previous album, this record definitely feels a little bit more mature. Sound-wise, better quality, better mix, better production. It still sounds raw, it still sounds like a hardcore punk album from New York, but it has better definition of sound within the songs and from song to song. So while I enjoyed the previous record, Up in Arms was a great album, but this record feels a little bit better as far as the value that it holds from a soundscape, from a purely soundscape point of view. So because of that, I feel like this album is definitely a step in the right direction and is definitely an improvement over the previous records. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Save the Robots. Very punk rock sound. This is one of the tracks that starts the definition of that punk rock sound that the album offers, leaving a little bit more of the hardcore behind. Even though this track has elements of both genres present, I honestly felt like the punk side dominated the overall experience. Very driven, the guitars sound great, and the guitars drive this track. The drums complement the sound, and they pack the sound behind those same guitars. You see the intensity in the sound, in the vocal performance. It has this cutting through experience. It feels very driven at times, and that drive really penetrates and cuts deep into the overall thickness of sound, into the overall essence that the song holds. The middle bridge is really interesting because it slows down the song and it takes you towards the solo, and then it takes you towards the end of the track that comes back to the origins, comes back to the way the song started, allowing this track to go full circle. Pausing, pumping the brakes a little bit, but then reigniting the experience, reigniting the aggression and intensity that this song has. Next we have Infectious. This song breaks the mold. This song feels different from the beginning of the record, and it feels different from that second half of the album, even though this song is smack in the middle of that second half. It's definitely a slower, darker, more melancholic song. It has some sludgy elements, but it also has some Alice in Chains elements. It takes you into a different atmosphere. The sound is different. The way it moves is different. The overall vibe that you get from the song is different. A much darker and deeper song all around, musically, lyrically, and vocally as well. Even vocally, this song stands out from the rest of the tracks. The rest of the tracks come across a little bit more organic, a little bit more natural. This one vocally has a little bit more work in it. It feels a little bit more electronic. It dives deeper into that darkness that the sound holds, and overall you feel like this track is allowing you to sink into it. It doesn't push you forward with the energy of the songs that came before and the energy of the songs that comes after. This track rather allows you to just melt away within it and just feel like you're covered in despair, in that darkness that creates that same despair. Really interesting track, a track that surprised me by how different it is from everything else on the record. And normally on an album that has 7 songs, 21 minutes, a song like this may not find room within it. I don't know how they were able to squeeze it in, but it allows the record to feel like that it's more engaging, that has more to offer, and the band themselves have the ability to really go perhaps slightly outside the box to create something unique, something interesting, something that will give some pause to the listener. Last but not least, Relentless. Great bass. Let me start off by saying this. I like the bass throughout the entire record, but on this track it really pops. It makes itself noticeable, and because of that, it has an interesting impact on the sound experience that the track gives. The drums add volume to the track, and the vocals bring consistency as far as intensity and aggression is concerned. It's punk, and it's a punk song, proving that punk is alive and well, and this track has all of those elements. It brings in that garage sound, it brings in that small venue, that sweaty small venue where you're so close to the audience. That raw nature, that organic nature of what it is to play or what it is to attend a punk rock show is present in everything that this song offers. From sound to lyrics to vocal delivery, everything is there. Great track. It also brings in a little bit of, maybe more than a little bit, Motorhead vibe in terms of the riffs, in terms of the sound, in terms of the rock approach. The rock that infuses the punk is definitely Motorhead driven, is definitely Motorhead influence, and it's impossible not to notice when you go through this track from start to finish. But great song all around. This is it, Bloodclot with Souls, out December 16th on Upstate Records. Let me know your thoughts on the singles, on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.